Okay, hello everybody, and welcome back to I Got Next. Today we have James Corey Johnson. He is another therapist. I told you guys about once a month I will do something with mental health. James, would you like to introduce yourself?
He keeps calling me James, but I go by Corey. The persons who call me James is because they don't know me. It has to do with my time as a probation parole officer. It has to do with some other things that I used to do in the community. So
Okay.
I go by Corey. James, but for people who don't know me, I am a licensed therapist in both Iowa and Illinois. I have a license in social work at the highest level. And so my background, actually, I have a master's in social work, I have a master's in clinical psychology, and I have been working with families, couples, individuals, communities for better part of about 20 years. I started the Voice Project right after COVID because it was time. The reason why is because there were so many people who had a sense of voicelessness. How do I talk to people? How do I reconnect? What is my purpose? What is my why? How do I make this happen? And so my quest has always been about find your why. Viktor Frankl said, if you can find your why, you can deal with any how. I can go through anything as long as I know why I'm doing it. So the Voice Project was birthed at that point. And actually before then, I was doing work. I just didn't put a name to it. So that's my spiel.
I would also like to say the Voice Project is where I got my first check from my company, very first check, with the students at
George Washington.
in Cedar Rapids, yeah. And that was really fun. That day was really fun. Just making sure everything that worked and seeing how the students reacted and things like that. That was a really fun day. And that was right before COVID. So I think you might have had the name right before. Like it was January of that year, January of 2020. And then we shut everything down. How did you get into this field? Like growing up, did you always know you wanted to do it, or how did that work?
So I tell my clients, I actually work with kids right now, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. There was a young lady that I was dating. This was back when phones were connected to walls with a cord, and you can only go so far. Our phone was on the wall in the kitchen. And so right where that wall is, there's an entrance into the dining, or excuse me, the living room. She called me and told me that she was going to kill herself. And so back then, again, corded phone, parents in the house, we got 5 minutes to be on the phone. So she calls me and hangs up. And I said, okay, I got to figure out what's going on. I took all the change in my pocket that I could find around the house. I drove to the local post office. They had a payphone. And I was feeding the payphone all these quarters, nickels, and dimes so that I could connect with this young lady because I really wanted to help. I never reached her, but 2 weeks later, she called me from the inpatient ward saying, Corey, why can't people just talk to me the way you talk to me? Fast forward, my grandfather dies my freshman year in college. I was slated to start going into med school. Due to malpractice on the part of the physician, I was mad at the medical industry, and so I shifted. I didn't see psychology as medicine for whatever reason. Even though they're couched together, I saw it as something separate. It didn't have medication. Again, I was naive. My twin suffered depression, major, our freshman year because he's actually the person who pronounced my grandfather dead. It really messed with his head. So it was really about how do I talk to him and talk to other persons who are hurting. That's how I got to psychology. Got a master's in psychology after I graduated, started working in clinics, and then 2008 happens. In the clinic that I was working for, I was the vice president of operations. There was a social worker who worked for me who said, "You're not a psychologist, you're a social worker because you deal in systems. But you also understand the human condition in it that you're not looking at solely the person, but the person in their environment. What is it about their environment that's impacting the person?" So I took that and I went back to school and got a master's in social work. So I paired the clinical skill sets of a psychologist with the social political awareness of a social worker, and that's how I came to be what I am today.
Let me ask you this, because I asked the last person I spoke with. How do you not bring everything home with you? Like, what do you do? Because if you're working with a tough child, a tough client, how do you, because for people who don't know, I am your older brother. So I've known you for years.
Older, big. He's a little big brother. He's Will is a little short. Don't worry about it. He's a little big brother. Go ahead. Go ahead. It's not about us. It's not about us. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh God. Anyway, it would be unfair if I was your height, but we'll talk about that later. But I don't know. I think it's like because I know how much you feel for people. So how do you not bring that home to your family?
It's all about perspective.
Okay.
My family, there's a saying, but by the grace of God go I. There are opportunities in which I can see myself and my kids, my wife, my siblings going through the same things that I'm working with my clients with. So I go hard for my clients. There isn't anything I wouldn't do within reason to make sure that they get what they need to be better for themselves. Again, I'm always basing my success on whether or not we reach the goals my clients have for themselves. But for those situations in which it's hard because there isn't a clear path forward, I do take things home. It's realistic that I would. The, the trick or the practice is not to hold on to it. I can share what I can share ethically so that I can disseminate or balance the burden. So my wife works in the school system. By that I mean she's school board, and so it's almost like we are swapping stories. You come home, you talk to your kids about here's what happened to a kid. They're nameless individuals, and I work in a community that's large enough where one person seems like a gazillion different people, and so I'm never disclosing anything that would identify who I'm working with. But what I can share is what I can share, and that's how I deal with it. Because if I did not, it would be very difficult to navigate these spaces. But the other part is just the techniques that you use in therapy. When I was going through school, there was a technique of just leaning to one side. Just the tilt of the head or the slight tilt of the body allows a person's direct negative assault, saying, here's all the trauma that I've gone through, to literally go past you. Now, it's psychological, right? It's all about whether or not I believe in what I'm doing. Therapy, like any other modality, you actually have to believe in the therapist and what they're saying in order for there to be the greatest benefit. But in order to be believable, you have to have a relationship. So you have to be able to build a level of rapport quickly and be able to sustain it. That's what people believe in. I believe in you because dot dot dot. You were nice, you asked the right questions, you know how to listen, you gave me relevant advice, and most of the advice that I provide is the genius that my clients give me. Well, Corey, where'd you get that from? I got it from you. All I'm doing is listening to you tell me about you and reflecting back to you what it is that you're doing. Now, there's a little bit more to it than that, but that's the long and the short of it.